There, and welcome to another how-to webinar from the TPS Southern Region. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. So today we're going to talk about how to find secondary sources to go with your primary sources. So first of all, what do I mean by secondary sources here? Um, Secondary sources would be any kind of informational text that would help put a primary source into context by providing historical background information, um, or it could help with the analysis of a primary source as well by comparing it with other primary sources or providing a timeline of sorts or kind of talking about how historians have told the story about that topic. So anything that helps and supports making primary sources make sense. And so you need to do that by constructing a narrative, and historians do that by writing secondary sources based on lots and lots and lots of primary sources, of course, and by also using secondary sources. But I'm not going to get in the weeds here and talk about, differentiate with tertiary sources or other kinds of things. I'm just going to put them all under the umbrella of secondary sources. So anything that supports and explains a primary source. And so, for example, here's a primary source, but what would be the kinds of things that the Library of Congress might have on its website that would be a secondary source to support the reading of this particular source? You might look for essays that provide historical context, timelines, exhibition text. Sometimes there's a little one paragraph blurb that goes with each primary source in an online exhibition. Blog articles from the Library of Congress's mini blogs. Speaker videos when the Library of Congress hosts guest speakers at their events or when it films one of their librarians talking about a different topic. These are usually available online for free through their website. And things like Today in History articles, which are very short, very easy to read, and very accessible for students as well as the general public. So these are just some of the examples that we're going to look at in this very short overview right now. And I'm going to start off with this particular primary source, which I have to kind of hop over to get into my browser window. So let's say that you are talking about World War II and you wanted to find, some secondary sources about the Battle of the Bulge because you have this fantastic map that you found that depicts the battle. You can see there's the bulge right there in the middle on Christmas Day, 1944. This is the Ardennes region of France near the German border. And the German advance towards the west has enveloped this one little French village. And unfortunately, it also enveloped the Air Force 101st Division. So the first place to check, this isn't always going to pan out for you, but the first place to check just to see is sometimes the collection homepages will have articles that'll have historical context. So to get to the collection homepage from a primary source bibliographic page, you can see right here on the right-hand side under part of, it's usually that first link right there. So World War II military situation maps. So, and then all of the digital collections will have these three tabs. Not all of them will have articles and essays, but most of them will. And of course, this one just happens to have an essay on the Battle of the Bulge. Yes, it's lucky, but I also selected that examples just to show you. So it's not an essay. This is a timeline where they give you a blow by blow every single day of what is going on in each of these maps. So again, here we have the secondary source little text that explains what you're looking at in the primary source. And so that can really help people get a lot out of looking at these primary sources. And so you can see there's, a paragraph, and that counts. Sometimes there's just a sentence, but that helps explain and provide those secondary sources. All right, well, let's say you want to look at a different aspect of World War II. Let's say you want to look at some Rosie the Riveter images. And the Library of Congress, of course, has a lot of Rosie the Riveter type images in its Farm Security Administration Office of War Information collections. There's one collection for black and white photos and another one for color photos. And a lot of the best Rosie the Riveter photos are in the color ones. And so we like this one. We use this one a lot, partly because it's in Tennessee, but it's just the composition and the color, the red bandana, and matching the red fingernail polish is just too perfect. So if we try to go to the collection homepage to see if they have articles or essays about Rosie the Riveter, unfortunately, they don't for this particular collection. So that's not going to help us find a secondary source for Rosie the Riveter. So we are just going to have to search everything on the Library of Congress website and type in Rosie the Riveter and see what happens. Now, you may have noticed that our primary source title did not have Rosie the Riveter as in those words anywhere in it. So a lot of the primary sources that are related to this topic are not going to show up in this kind of search. But a secondary source, an essay talking about that, would certainly use this phrase because that is the phrase that all of these are known by. So here we have over 1,500 search hits. Now we're going to do the opposite of what we've done in previous webinars, where we wanted to find the primary sources. Now we're going to weed out the primary sources and just try to find secondary sources. And one really good way to do that is to go under original format over here on the left-hand side and click web page, because most of the secondary sources on the Library of Congress website are going to be in the format of a web page. So first of all, you see we have a research guide dedicated to this topic. That's important. We'll come back to that later. And there seems to be a press release. That might not seem very helpful, but we'll come back to that and I'll show you how it could be. Oh, there's a Today in History article. I like those. They're short, sweet, and to the point. Ooh, there's a blog about women's wartime work. Oh, excellent, excellent. And then we get into some kind of related things. But I think we've got a lot to start off with. So let's take a look at what these are. I'm going to come back to the research guide in a minute. And let's start off with this news release. So this doesn't really, what this talks about is the fact that the Library of Congress was screening a new documentary last year in person. So this was the, kind of an announcement of an event. But the name of this documentary, which is not available through the Library of Congress website, but there's the title. So what I did is I copied that title and pasted it into YouTube, and I found it there. And so documentaries are fantastic secondary sources that help tell the story while weaving in primary sources. And they're also a very engaging way to get people's attention and to help them follow the story. And so so you can see that a news release might give you some helpful pieces of information like this one did. And here's the Today in History article. Rosie the Riveter was born. And so this is just a few paragraphs long, you can see, but it has a lot of really great links to both primary and additional secondary sources. Here we have lyrics from a Rosie the Riveter song that they got from a lesson plan at the Eisenhower Foundation website where you can go from here. There's a Learn More section that has all these links to more resources that are related to Rosie the Riveter and World War II in general as a topic. And so this is a lot of helpful information in a very short amount of space. And this is also so short that you actually could have students read it during a class period because it doesn't take that long. All right, well, and then of course the Library of Congress blogs. This one is the Science, Technology, and Business blog. And there's the iconic poster, We Can Do It, that everybody thinks of when they hear Rosie the Riveter. This is talking about this particular publication, this periodical that this researcher found, and she's telling you a little bit about the information she found in there. And then, of course, this links to some of those iconic images. There's the one that we were just looking at, and then there's, another guide that's related. So again, it's a good secondary source, but it also launches you into some further secondary sources. All right. So going back to the research guide for Rosie the Riveter, you can see the first thing in the menu is videos. And the Library of Congress actually has this half-an-hour video where one of their librarians tells the story. This is a documentary, and so she shows you different primary sources and tells you the story and the history behind this iconic figure and the significance of women workers during World War II. So this is a fantastic secondary source. And you might wonder, why didn't this come up in our search? Well, the reason is, let's go back to the search results. It's not considered a web page by the library's algorithms. This is actually considered a film or video. So if you go back to our search results and you narrow down by film and video under original format, it's the first thing that pops up. So that's why. And then there's lots of information here about how to find more primary sources about that. But then there's a page full of external websites where they take you to where you can find, maybe some of those contextual essays or timelines or other kinds of things about this same topic in other institutional web pages. So that's a great place to look, the research guides. Now, there are a couple other kinds of places to look on the Library of Congress where they provide good secondary source information. So I'm going to show you some of those examples. So here's the resource guide for just World War II in general. And if we go to Library of Congress resources, yes, it'll take you to digital collections, which is where you go to find more primary sources. But then it'll have exhibitions, which are fantastic for secondary source information. Like, for instance, this Women Come to the Front. This is an older exhibition, but oftentimes these will have kinds of short, like clusters of paragraphs that provide historical context. Like if you click on this first one, War, Women, and Opportunity, here we have some really great narrative that tells us the story and sets the stage for all the primary sources that they are then going to throw at you to help kind of flesh out that story. And so exhibitions are just a fantastic way to get just enough secondary source information to make sense of what you're looking at. And so, here's an example of a more traditionally formatted exhibition where you can see there's a really good, just kind of one paragraph blurb to go with each of the different primary sources. Another place to look, and the last place I'm going to show you right now, is the teacher's page. They have classroom materials. And so we're going to look at some of the primary source sets because, okay, so if you go to the primary source sets and you go under era, this is the World War II era. And so, like, for instance, here's one on veteran stories, struggles for participation, where it will give you some examples of some women and some World War II soldiers who experienced, extra struggles beyond just the one of being a soldier. But if you go past all the primary sources, all of the primary source sets at the teacher's page will have a historical background section on them. And this is a great place for either you as a teacher or as an educator, or to have a student, or to, use this for other kinds of audiences. This one is set up like a timeline, but it's just great information here that's a really good supplement to, it's more than what they would have in their textbooks, for instance. Another example would be another aspect of World War II history, of course, is Japanese American internment. And this also has kind of a more historical, a more conventional kind of historical background here, where they're talking about different aspects of the internment. So that's a great place to find it too. So that's kind of all I'm gonna have time to show you today, but basically, I will talk more about using secondary sources in a future webcast, but I hope to see you. Thanks for watching.